In some recent cases, I've looked at mental health in the context of violent crime. And in the recent case of Gregor Bald, I looked at how drugs and mental health can be a potent and dangerous mix. For today's case, I'm going to move across into the drug side of the equation. And not just personal drug use, but rather how the overall drug trade can seem glamorous and enticing to a young person going through teenage years, where peer reputation can be so important. How young people can be drawn into a war of greed that they don't realize that they are merely the pawns in, disposable and replaceable. Then when the dust settles, it is the friends and families that face ongoing grief and suffering, while the trade that the young people are so invested in goes on undeterred by death and tragedy. We're heading to the east of the UK for this case from January of 2022. This is the murder of Joe Dix, and this is Murder of Crows. Norfolk is a county on the east coast of the UK. My kids live there, so I know to my suffering that there are no motorways in the county and very few dual carriageways for overtaking fucking tractors. But it is a beautiful, if very flat area of the UK. The countryside is painted with oilseed rape fields and lavender farms, trees, fields, and definitely no mountains. The main city is Norwich, and it is one of only 3 cities in the entire county. Yes, I do know what the other 2 are, but no, I'm not going to tell you. The Anglo-Saxons settled the site of the modern city sometime between the 5th and 7th centuries, founding the towns of Northwick, meaning North Farm, and from which Norwich takes its name, and Westwick, with a lesser settlement at Thorpe. Norwich became settled as a town in the 10th century, and then became a prominent centre of East Anglian trade and commerce. Fast forwarding to the 20th century, Norwich suffered extensive bomb damage during World War II, affecting large parts of the old city centre and Victorian terraced housing around the centre. Industry and the rail infrastructure also suffered. The heaviest raids occurred on the nights of the 27th to the 28th and the 29th to the 30th of April 1942. 229 citizens were killed in the two Baedeker raids, with 1,000 others injured and 340 killed by bombing throughout the war, giving Norwich the highest air raid casualties in eastern England. Out of the 35,000 domestic dwellings in Norwich, 2,000 were destroyed completely, and another 27,000 suffered some level of damage. Throughout the 1960s to the early 70s, the city was completely altered, and large areas of Norwich were cleared to make way for modern redevelopment. And coming up to date, according to the 2021 census, Norwich had a population of around 144,000 people. In other highlights, Norwich is one of the largest medieval cathedrals in the UK. But now, let's discuss darker matters. In terms of crime, Norwich is the most dangerous city in Norfolk and is among the top 20 most dangerous overall out of Norfolk's 530 towns, villages and cities. The overall crime rate in Norwich in 2023 was 105 crimes per 1,000 people. And this compares poorly to Norfolk's overall crime rate, coming in 61% higher than the Norfolk rate of 65 per 1,000 population. For England, Wales and Northern Ireland as a whole, Norwich is the 22nd safest city and the 922nd most dangerous location out of all towns, cities and villages, so on the whole reasonably safe. In January 2024, Norwich was the worst city in Norfolk for antisocial behaviour, with 196 crimes reported and a crime rate of 1.2 per 1,000 population. January 2024 was also a bad month for Norwich residents, when it was Norfolk's most dangerous city for burglary, recording 43 crimes at a rate of 0.27 per 1,000 population. The most common crimes in Norwich are violence and sexual offences. But for this case, we need to look at a more modern form of criminal network, which is that of county lines. Now, the term county line is used in reference to a form of criminal activity in which drug dealers in major cities establish networks, typically through a dedicated phone number or line, for the supply and sale of drugs to users in more isolated towns and rural areas, using other people, typically those who are young or otherwise vulnerable, to carry, store and sell the drugs. And it's through this system that local gangs usually compete to try to monopolize the trade in a certain area. And some young people can then seem like big fish in small ponds, and who often have false senses of grandeur due to the peer respect within these small ponds. But in reality, they are really just little boys and girls playing at being gangsters, but with very real weapons. But before we dive into the world of county lines in Norwich, we first need to look at the life of one of our main players, that being a kid named Joe Dix. Joe Dix was the firstborn child of Emma and Phil Dix. Joe was born in Brighton in December of 2003, but the family moved to Norwich in 2004 to be closer to Joe's grandparents. Joe gained his only sibling, his younger sister Bethany, in 2007, and he was always super proud of her. Joe was always a confident child and old for his age, in that he was knowledgeable and would happily talk to adults at family occasions. But as a little boy, he loved Bob the Builder, as well as tools, sports and anything active. Joe attended a small county primary school. He was bright and excelled at all sports that he tried his hand at. He was a popular pupil, but he also had a very cheeky side. Joe was sports mad. He played football for Norwich Corinthians and Norwich Elites, and he even had a 12-week period in the Norwich City Football Academy. Joe also played rugby and cricket, and most evenings and weekends he could be found playing some type of sport. And as he grew, Joe became aware of his own image and would ensure that his hair was perfect. He developed a love for trainers, caps, and nice clothes. But as he grew into his teens, things seemed to change for the rapidly developing kid. Joe hit puberty pretty young, meaning he often looked older than he was, as he was taller and broad-shouldered when compared to his peers. But in his early teens, Joe was criminally exploited by some unscrupulous men, and he was drawn into a gang called the Third Side Crew, who were and are a notorious gang within Norwich's drugs subculture. They persuaded him by offers of easy money and a glamorous lifestyle, And so Joe became embroiled in the growing culture of county lines. Joe's behaviour and school attendance drastically declined. Joe would get very angry, often breaking things, and had multiple episodes of going missing from home. He was put on a child protection plan with Norfolk Children's Services and became known to Norfolk police. Joe tended to gravitate towards his friends more than his family. Joe was first arrested for the supply of Class A drugs, and the money and drugs he was carrying were confiscated by the police, and this left him in debt, meaning that Joe was most vulnerable after he had been arrested. And at this point he broke down, recalling horrific events that had happened, how he had been mugged and beaten up, and said he would go missing from home because he didn't want his family to see his injuries. Joe was seemingly unable to escape this life, as he was arrested several more times. The police fitted a panic alarm and a security camera at the family home. And then, after months of delays, Joe received a Youth Rehabilitation Order, or YRO, from Norwich Crown Court. And this YRO included a home curfew and a GPS tag for 6 months, ensuring he didn't enter certain areas of Norwich. Joe found it very hard, but did generally comply with all the rules. He even started back in education. With some home tutoring, Joe passed his maths and English exams. He didn't have any periods of being missing from home because he was on curfew. And he was very limited to where he could go within Norwich. And so to fill his time, he started doing labouring work with his dad, Phil. And this gave him structure to the days that he went through the curfew. He would always walk his dog before he went to work. But loyalties within these gangs run deep. And even after some time ostensibly away from the scene, one phone call could have the young man running back to his so-called friends. And that brings us to the 28th of January 2022. On this particular day, Benjamin Gill, Cameron Palmer, both of whom were 18 years old, and Hans B. Harry, who was 19 years old, from Third Side Crew's rival gang, OTM, which stands for Only the Money, the three men had gone to a flat in Vale Green in Norwich, intending to steal money and drugs. Inside the property was a London-based County Lines drug dealer who phoned Joe Dix for help. and 18-year-old Joe, who, despite his seeming rehabilitation, left his flat nearby and headed to Vale Green with a large knife. A chase and a scuffle ensued, with Joe, along with Gill, Palmer and B. Harry, in the street, and this ended with Joe suffering fatal stab injuries. And much of the on-street chase was captured on CCTV. Joe was taken to Norfolk and Norwich University Hospital, where he died an hour later. The three, I was going to say men, but really they were just boys, were traced and apprehended. They went to trial at Norwich Crown Court in August of 2023. As part of the proceedings, 4 knives were subsequently identified as weapons that had been used, including a 24-inch or 61-centimetre sword. Elizabeth Marsh, KC, defending B. Harry, said the murder was not premeditated, adding that her client was clever but had not intended to kill. He had no convictions prior to Joe's murder. Palmer's barrister, Simon Spence, KC, said his client was 17 at the time of the offence, and that all 3 defendants should be treated equally in sentencing, with him saying about his client, "He fell into the dark and murky world of drugs in Norwich." Justin Rouse, KC, defending Gill, said that the murder was out of character for Gill, who was failed by a complete lack of parental expectation. Quite the word salad there. Judge Alice Robinson said that no sentence could bring Joe back, nor reduce his family's grief. Joe's mother, Emma Dix, read a victim impact statement to the court, saying that his murder had devastated her family, with her saying, "It's unthinkable that a child should die before their parents. How can I possibly tell you how it feels to not be able to protect your child?" She also spoke of the family event that her son would now miss, and in referring to the CCTV footage that was shown in court, said that this was nothing compared to the video of him running for his life, with her adding, "I cannot tell you how many times this has played over in our minds." She also said that she wondered whether her son was in pain and whether he knew he was going to die. She said that she was now on medication after being diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. Her family had suffered further distress from receiving malicious messages since his death, with her saying that some of these messages even purported to be from Joe himself. Adding to that pain, she also told the court that a memorial garden at Vale Green, near to where her son had been fatally stabbed, had been desecrated. And this is the ingrained pettiness that gang loyalties seem to generate. On the 4th of October 2023, Palmer and Gill were jailed for life with a minimum term of 21 years, while B. Harry was jailed for life with a minimum term of 20 years.
In addition to grieving, we have silently coped with Joe's memorial garden being destroyed and multiple malicious communications via social media. Justice may have been served. However, there are no winners from knife crime. We will never get Joe back. The ripple effects from Joe's murder is huge, not only impacting on our family and friends, but everyone who knew Joe in the local community.
But the tit for tat, or as I often say instead, twit for twat, continued relating to Joe's death. And this had already happened, with tragedy occurring on the 17th of January 2023. A friend of Joe's named Alfie Hammett, who was 18 at the time, murdered Ray Quigley in front of sickened shoppers in broad daylight in Ipswich, Suffolk. Quigley, who was also 18, had been linked to the OTM gang after attending the Joe Dix murder trial in support of 3 of his friends who were in the dock. Hammett was ultimately jailed for 24 years. Joshua Howell, who was 17 at the time, was found to be an accomplice and was convicted for 20 years. Joe's parents, Emma and Phil, described how Hammett often sent sympathetic messages, such as "thinking of you," without realizing he was a fellow gang member. With Joe's mum Emma Dix saying he, referring to Hammett, was one of Joe's mates. We were aware of who he was and what he looked like. He was one of the ones who went to Joe's funeral. And he used to message us saying, "I'm gutted for you." That's what's hard, when someone's telling you that, but their actions are completely different. It's bad that another family has to go through the feelings that we have had to. We can empathize with how they feel, but you don't want it to happen again. We don't in any way condone it. And we're disappointed that people who are linked with Joe didn't learn from Joe's death and the ripple effect it has on us all. It's not just the person who's killed, It's everyone and anyone who has ever known that person. Joe's family have tried to turn their grief to positive purpose by setting up the Joe Dix Foundation. The foundation's goal is to raise awareness of child criminal exploitation and knife crime to prevent any family from enduring the heartbreak that Joe's family has faced. I will leave a link to the foundation in the video description.
And particularly the way they recruit youngsters is a huge concern for many parents, and is tragically something our next guest has first-hand experience of. Emma's son, Joe Dix, was fatally stabbed at the age of 18 after being groomed and exploited by a county lines drug gang in Norwich. His heartbroken family have since set up a foundation in his name. Family friend Lorraine Bliss also joins us this morning. Thank you so much for being here with us in the studio. I'm so sorry to hear what happened to Joe and Emma, just so incredibly devastating. Can we just start by you telling us a little bit more about your son?
Yeah, so Joe was my firstborn and only son. I've got a daughter as well. We describe him as a lovable rogue, really. He had good traits and bad traits, but everyone seemed to love him and he entertained the room. He was really good at sports, very confident, always, chatting to adults. Yeah, he's missed very much.
Yeah, very much so, I'm sure. When was it you first realised that he'd got involved somehow with a gang?
So we think it was when he was about the age of 14. He once divulged to his dad that he was at a local park after school, and he was approached by some people to play football, and then they went back to the people's house, played video games, and over a series of days, weeks, we're not quite sure, they sort of befriended him, and then eventually it started that, oh, can you just drop this package up here? And it was a life Joe couldn't ever get out of.
And it was the 28th of January, wasn't it, 2022? That's going to be a date that you never forget, where Joe was fatally stabbed. So tragic. Lorraine, just to bring you in here, you actually met Joe when he was starting to bring his life around and on the straight and narrow. Why, for you, is it so important to be involved in this Joe Dix Foundation?
Youth violence and knife crime is very topical at the moment, normally associated with drug use, recruitment of young people. We're really passionate to create awareness on the signs, dangers and consequences. The 3 young men that murdered Joe were sentenced to 62 years. It's vitally important that we get to all young people under 18. There's a myth that it's only disadvantaged young people that get caught up in this. It's all young people.
Yeah, and it's this, you've touched on it there, but it's this awareness. You are so passionate about getting the awareness out there of the consequences of what can happen if you get involved in this sort of activity.
Yeah, well, what the aims and objectives of the charity are to go into schools, talk with young people, talk with professionals, talk with parents, anywhere, community centres. We have a helpline that parents and young people can ring for support, and we then are able to listen to Emma and Phil felt isolated when this happened to Joe, so we can listen and signpost on to agencies that can.
That's just so valuable as well, isn't it? And talking about awareness, having more of an idea of the warning signs when it comes to young people being exploited or gangs getting involved is key as well, isn't it? What would you say, Emma, are some of those signs to be aware of?
Lots of the signs that we've worked out are retrospective. So me and Phil have sort of devised this list of stuff that we've looked at since. Lots of things like expensive clothes that you can't explain why your child has got them. You know, Joe would say he'd swap things, but realistically not.
So suddenly, not like he's saved for weeks and weeks and weeks and bought something.
No,
these are sudden changes
appear.
and got these clothes.
Yeah, suddenly appear. He'd come home and have a new pair of trainers, come home and have a £500 jacket, things like that. Mobile phones, he would have more than one mobile phone, so that in itself is a warning sign.
What about the use of the mobile phone? Because lots of parents will say, oh, my kids are on the phone all the time. Is it how it was being used that was of interest to you?
Yeah, definitely. And there were lots of on the phone constantly, but lots of very short phone calls, literally sometimes a couple of seconds, and it'd be, he'd be off the phone again, then it would ring again. A lot of social media, changing of accounts on Snapchat. Other things that we would find in the house would be disposable gloves, little pieces of plastic bags, money, all things that we just couldn't explain.
Yeah.
So any on their own, you may have an excuse or an explanation for, but when it's collectively, these are the signs.
Yeah, so good to just have clarity on those types of things and look out for. And I guess having that ongoing conversation between parent and child, even if the subject matter might be quite difficult, you'd encourage people to have those. You've got information on the website about that, haven't you?
Yeah, we have. And no matter what your child has done, as a family, and we feel strongly that always have that door open. If you go off and have an argument, always message your child to say that you love them and you're always here, because you never know that one time that they might actually want to open up to you. Yeah. And if people don't have a loving family, because not everyone does, there are trusted adults that they can go to get help if they really want it. These children.
Talking is just so important,
isn't it? And parents, you're there as a parent, and you'll do anything to help your child. Yeah. So you wouldn't be shocked.
Emma, I've finally just got to ask how you're doing now. This only happened back in 2022. It's something obviously you're still trying to come to terms with in a way.
I think personally, I can say that it's not something I'm ever going to get over. I don't feel like I've grieved Joe. I don't feel like I ever will. But by doing the foundation, we're talking about Joe every day, and everything that we do is for him, and it just keeps his memory alive.
So there we have a saga that repeats itself on the streets, in the seedy underbelly of towns and cities all over the world, every single day. I have to say, it reminds me of the lyrics of the song Toy Soldiers, where the chorus tells us, step by step, heart to heart, left, right, left, we all fall down like toy soldiers. Bit by bit, torn apart, we never win, but the battle wages on for toy soldiers. Kids killing kids, and for what? To impress some guy on the end of a phone line. This is the pervasive and endemic reality of the drug trade in the 21st century. But for now, and for the sake of this particular story, I will dedicate this video to Joe Dix and to Raymond Quigley, who were both victims of a so-called gang war over county lines. Completely unnecessary and beyond tragic. the ripple effects from their deaths will be felt for years by those who knew and loved them. And I send love and condolences to all those touched by their deaths, and all of the other kids senselessly lost to a war that seemingly has no end. Thank you for watching another episode of Murder of Crows. Please subscribe if you haven't already. It really helps me out, and if that's not enough for you, it would make me feel all fuzzy in my tum-tum. But with that said, I'm Steve. This bookend is Samson. And we will see you when we see you.